a kind of constant devotional practice to what it is to be alive, uninterested in the spoils of false belonging, and moving with a kind of wholesome intent that is just to be and yet being reviled. It's a paradox that is too big for me to hold on my own. And so I look to my trans community to knit the space together between moving in a way that has no interest other than that of authenticity, and somehow being made a target for that. It doesn't quite compute. And so for all of our trans siblings who are here tonight, I say thank you, and I see you. And to everyone who might think that I am off my rocker, I say thank you, and I see you. And for all of the pain that causes me to break and open and rise and fall and expand in this kind of profound process of choosing authenticity over comfort, I too say thank you.
Let's take a breath. I feel like oftentimes when I go to services like this, there's a lot of like, who's next, what's next? And my autistic brain is like, I need this to go on schedule. But I think we also need to like value what people are saying. So let's take a breath. And I'm gonna invite CK whenever you are ready. You can come up here. You can choose between these.
Hey everyone, I'm CK. My pronouns are they, them. Thank you, Daniel Jose, for putting this together this evening, and thank you all for being here. I wrote a piece of poetry from the perspective of visibility, and I feel that's important now more than ever, and I've named it Sacred Trans. Visibility does not equate to inclusivity. The I, the me, the we you see. A soul first who quenches their thirst for freedom within. It's not a sin, where did we begin? Built in the image and likeness into this mess, where there is beauty all around, can you feel beyond the sound? Feel a rapture within this antiquated fracture, the game of political power, not our true nature of everessence. Our lights in the shadow of darkness. No human is less than, no man more than. Hiding behind words and actions, not considering the impact on large fractions of a community who bear witness to more than you can see. Free as a phoenix rising from the ashes, navigating hateful lashes, our dream of equality not playing into fascist clashes. We will not abide with transgenocide, hate mutating, fear transmuting, hope and trust for a better future. Suture hate's unloved wounds as our loving hearts beat. We strive, we're alive, present, existing, finding meaning in this window of being, not less than anyone else, rewriting history on the shelf. Diversity, equality, and inclusion more than buzzwords. Tick boxes, while our hearts tick with our sense of being, our inner knowing growing, not stunted, not shunted by some human shadows unhunted. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I really want to thank the folks who offered themselves to share something. It's vulnerable to be up here and talk about your lived experience. And so let's take another breath and honor that. I want to call up Romy whenever you are ready to share.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hello, sweet siblings in Christ and beyond that as well. I was remembering back in 2019, I was in a meditation class that met here every morning, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 7 a.m. And we meditated for about 40 minutes every morning. And I just came here to start pursuing my Master's of Divinity and was terrified by that prospect. Mostly the prospect of dying poor and alone, a pariah, someone who really went out there, who took a leap to invest themselves in liberal and leftist religious world, like that's a lucrative market with safety. And I was also coming from a place in which I was not safe, a period of time where I was surviving mostly through friendship, found family, and community. And if I know anything about my family, my fellow union students, is that many of us share that trajectory. And many of us take that leap with varying results. And I remember sitting here and really sitting with that fear. I'm gonna die poor and alone. What the hell am I doing here? I'm gonna die poor and alone. And then one day, it dawned on me that every day in our world, millions of people, thousands of people die poor and alone, and God loves them the most. Why was I afraid of being where God's love is most intensely in the world? Why is that scary to me? And since then, that thought has eroded away at me. Still, some nights I lay there being like, oh my God, I'm gonna die one day. what am I going to do? What am I doing? But slowly, like grace, it keeps eroding away at me. And then over the past couple of weeks, this thought has come back in my mind, and I've begun thinking about it in the way in which that we need to reject the fear of dying well. We need to reject that fear of not dying well, the fear of dying alone, humiliated, ashamed. Because if we cower to that fear, we will never live our lives. This world that we are in, and I mean not this world, this beautiful fleshy matter that we all inhabit, but the world as configured by power and by profit and by capital, is constantly trying to make us choose life ways in which we will die well. To die in a nice hospital, to die with retirement, to die surrounded by our nuclear family. I reject that because I am interested in the life ways that don't fear death and all of the radical possibilities, all of the abundance that is outside of that fear. We must, I think, embrace death. Embrace that there is more to life than death. We have to, what I feel in my heart, embrace grace. We must embrace that we live in a world that denies us to feel grace, the grace that emanates from our bodies, the grace guiding us to who God created us to be. And I have faith in that grace, and I've experienced it in moments of euphoria, in moments of joy and community, in sadness, in remembrance of all who we have lost, who also rejected that fear of not dying well. I have faith in this grace that is deeply, deeply buried in each of us, deeply buried in this world, a faith in a grace that is abundant and obvious as waking up in the morning and remembering who you are. I have faith in a grace that defies our comprehension, that breaks molds and barriers and reveals new selves to ourselves, to each other. I have faith, and I have experienced that grace. And in the coming months and years and decades, we must keep to that faith that cannot be taken away by powers and principalities, because we deny their death and we deny their life. and we choose our own. Amen.
Collective breath. I want to ask Maya to come up and grace us with your music. And if the team can help me help her. Thank you. I'll admit I've been running around all day. I was up since 3 a.m. trying to make sure that everything went smoothly, and I'm not saying this to please myself. I'm saying this because I haven't had a moment to really sit and think about what this day means. And so getting to hear music and like sitting, even if it was for 5 minutes, and seeing the slideshow, yeah, feelings. Is Emojin here? Okay. In the meantime, while we wait for the next person, I will invite folks, if you want to stand up, stretch. The slideshow behind me is folks from all around the world who died in some way or another. There's a lot of, there's the ways that they died, but I never like to focus on that. So on the table, there are photos of people in the US who were killed this year. And there's, not everybody, but most of them have bios about their lives, not their deaths. So I invite you to take a couple of minutes, intermission, if you will, to stretch and just sort of take some of this in.
Broadway is back. The Great Gatsby is a glamorous, glitzy Broadway extravaganza that explodes with life and energy.
Hi, I'm Brad Baxter, founder of Whisker.
We're back, sort of. I'm going to invite Ollie to come up and share a few words. Yeah, I have nothing else to say. You can come up.
Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I'm sorry for being late. And I'm in this pattern, this cycle, maybe it's familiar to some of you, where every year I'm like, oh, damn, it's like that time of year. And this year I'm gonna write something. This year I'm gonna like reach down into my soul and try to like figure out how to explain my identity to the world. And this year I'll like find a good way to say it. And this year I'll make it really clear that this isn't just about trans people, it's actually about all of us. And I don't do it because it's really hard, actually. It's really hard, and I've failed at this for 2 years so far at Union, and the last minute I just read somebody else's words, the words of people who I'm very indebted to, who have the gift and do the sacrifice every day of reaching down and try to explain their experience. And so I'm still not really gonna explain my experience, but I am gonna try to at least craft something that I pulled together between the subway and here and some theology I'm trying to read, and it's attempting to be a theological argument, and if it sucks, I welcome feedback, really, truly. Because honestly, I just want this to get better. I want us to find ways to talk about it together, and I want to find ways that it's not just trans people talking about this. It really, really matters. Or somebody who happened to date a trans person, or somebody who happens to have a friend or a family member and had a gateway trans in their life, so now they care. Bless your gateway transes. I'm here to say thank you to all the gateway transes who have brought some people in, but like we need more than that. So I'm calling this the other 1%. Trans people in the US make up roughly 1% of the population. I saw a statistic recently that Trump spent $250 million making just anti-trans propaganda videos, which is kind of cool in a way, because if you do the math and we're 1% of the population, that's like $150 spent per trans person in the US, which is probably like more than anybody has spent on trans people before. So if you want to spin it, that's kind of cool. For every $100 that's given out in philanthropy every year, if you cut the $100 into dollars and you cut the dollar bills into pennies, then 4.6 of those pennies go to trans people for every $100 that is spent. So if you think of Trump's 250 million, that's compared to an annual like 48 million that like all of philanthropy gives to trans people. So I've just been walking around since reading that statistic like I would like my $150, and I think we should all get ours too, and maybe that could be a campaign we do. But I think the point there is that the trans community is devalued, not just devalued, dehumanized, doesn't count at all until it's convenient to have a common enemy, and then it's like valuable and worth investing in. And I'm only talking in money because we live under capitalism, and like that's a way we like tend to understand what value means, right? But it's actually not about this 1% of the population, and there's really not much overlap between this 1% of the population and the other, what we usually call the 1%, except maybe Caitlyn Jenner, who's like probably the only person standing in the Venn diagram between the two. But it's like the rhetoric is, we talk about pronouns, or we talk about like clumsy grammar constructions of how to not make somebody feel bad when you're trying to talk about an individual and how they feel about their identity that you may or may not understand and is a really small fraction of the population, so like, why does it actually matter? Is it about bathrooms? Is it about the shape and size of the skin formation of the person in the stall next to you? Is that really what it's about? Is it about a fringe population with some kind of mental health disorder that maybe you care about because you're a benevolent, benign person rooted in morality? Is it about converting children? Is it about women's sports? I wish the world cared about women's sports. I wish. I don't really think it's about that. Maybe it is. Shout out to the New York Liberty. Bathrooms matter. I will quote Alok here, who says, "When we speak about restrooms, we talk as if gender ends on the sign outside the door. But I learned intimately how gender segregated restrooms are here to actually create gender itself. The boys' restroom was where my classmates peered over one another's urinals to look at each other's dicks. It was where they talked about the girls they want to fuck. It was where they came to have private conversations, to fight, to tease, to compare. I didn't go into the boys' restroom because I hated being gendered. I wanted to pee without having my body surveilled, compared, categorized. It's not misgendering that's the problem, it's gendering." I'll say that again. It's not misgendering that's the problem, it's gendering. So these policies that we're talking about, they might seem niche, but we have to talk about religion, especially in a seminary context. I think it's our duty, and I'm still learning about religion. I'm still learning how to try to talk about religion. I will lean on Max Strassfield here, who's a scholar and author who writes about transing religion and what that would look like to trans religion. They write about the Mississippi HB 1523 anti-trans bill about bathrooms, where that bill was written specifically to protect a religious belief in the gender binary. Science and religion are like intertwined and braided together and put into this knot that's impossible to untangle that supports that. And it conspires together to make the binary seem like a natural law or perhaps even something divinely ordained. And that's dangerous, right? When we talk about these things being divinely ordained, it's harder to pull apart that knot. It becomes truth. Max says, when your cosmology is cisgender by default, it precludes trans existence. So we have to look at our cosmology. Do we have a cisgender cosmology? If we haven't examined it, yeah, probably we do. I'll quote Joy Layden, who writes, "The question of what aspects of humanity reflect our kinship with our bodies and our bodiless creator." She says, "This is at the heart of what I now recognize as a personal version of trans theology. Not because it's a question specific to transgender people, but because being transgender forced me to search for aspects of my own humanity that weren't dependent on my body or the meanings others gave it. To me, whether or not we are transgender, we engage in trans theology whenever we try to look past sex and gender, bodies and binaries, to understand what in humanity reflects the image of God." So what I want to ask is, can we collectively trans as a verb? What would that look like? Can we trans our own cosmologies? Can we unpack how bodies and the ideas of bodies are formed through these collectives of what bodily attributes should be and determined by the powers that be? Can we describe how we could imagine alternate modes of spirituality and religion that don't create these binaries and these arbitrary separations and divides or clusters of characterizations that are labeled and created? If I could ask for one thing during Trans Awareness Week, it's a rebrand. I would love for it to be Cis Self-Awareness Week instead of Trans Awareness Week. I would ask, if you are not trans, please investigate your own theology. Please investigate the way your own body is restricted, punished, and policed. Trans Awareness Week is not about 1% of the population. This week is about how humans are. It's about who we're attracted to. It's about our fear of our own attraction and how we deal with our own fear. It's about our fear of our own expression and how we deal with our own fear. It's about how we'd rather kill somebody else or ourselves than admit something to ourselves that might be scary. It's about awareness of how we separate and punish and divide in the face of those things. So I'll leave you with some questions to reflect on. If you want to, you could close your eyes and really feel into this. Like, take a breath, take a moment. See if you can feel it in your body. So taking a deep breath and feeling. What part of your own humanity isn't dependent on your body or the meanings that others give to your body? What percentage of you lives outside of an easy binary box of categorization? How do you know? What percentage of you is repressed from your own awareness and outside of your consciousness? Do you know? Do you want to know? What part of you is locked up, frozen, or desperate to manifest? How do you know? What's telling you? How do you listen to it? What part of you have you gotten back in touch with? What part of you have you delighted in reclaiming and realizing that there's no separation between what we call holy and what we cast out? And finally, what part of you is willing to fight for the liberation of all beings, including yourself? Thank you.
Thank you. Collective breath. I have a speech after the next person, but I wanted to share a poem. I've written two for Tidor before, but I'll share one of them. I wish I had the hands of a god to take up the blood from those souls and paint her name on gold. I'd take the bruises from the corpses, bring purple back to royalty. I'd give them arms to run to when the only arms they've seen have been those coming mercilessly. I'd take away the rule book for survival because they'd breathe life, they'd breathe magic back into this air. I'd place the fallen stars back in the night sky so she can brighten up this world again. If I had the power of a deity, I could divide the Red Sea for each of us because I don't want to drown in judgment. If I could raise people from graves, I'd make zombies royalty, the venom in their stomachs, the self-hatred on the roads, the anchors hanging would vanish. He'd be the man he always knew he was. She'd be the queen she was destined to be. They'd be alive. I'd save them if I could, honor the air they breathe because it's stardust, clear the roads they walk with palms. Jewels don't belong in the ground. They deserve to shine. I'm going to invite one of my favorite people in this world to come and also honor us with music.
This year, I was just laughing and having a good time with my friends. We're standing outside of a restaurant, waiting for our reservation, and someone tried to stab me. And so this day of remembrance for me is about feeling joy and playing the piano. So I'm going to do that for you.
So a little something about me is that I go really hard for my friends, and getting to do this meant that I got to ask both of my soulmates, Amelia being one of them, to play, and so I'm honored, and my heart is full of joy right now. I'm gonna take a breath because I need a second, and I want a collective breath too. So. And I keep asking us to do that because breath is life, right? Like God breathed into the first human to make life. And so when we breathe together, we are acknowledging each other's livelihoods. So 8 years ago, I was asked to deliver a speech at the center as a youth member for Trans Day of Remembrance for the first time. At the time, I was early in my transition. I had not started hormones yet. And I lived in constant fear and invalidation from the world around me. I was actively attending a trans mass support group at Calum Lord, which is where I still get my medical care, making friends who could understand my struggles. 8 years ago, many of us lived in fear after the presidential election, worried about what our lives and safety would look like with a Trump administration. One of my friends attempted suicide shortly after the election, and I was so scared that my speech would have to include one more person in the list of people we lost. I didn't think I was gonna cry this early. This year, the Trevor Project crisis hotline for queer and trans youth saw an overall 700% increase in calls, texts, and chats after the election compared to prior weeks. Now, I can list more stats, but I think we could all understand the heightened anxiety that many of us are feeling, many of us trans folks are feeling about our livelihoods. That weight of responsibility to hold my community, honor our ancestors, and affirm the living is not something I take lightly. I recognize the privileges that I hold, the leadership roles that I own, and the emotions of caring for a community that is constantly under attack. I make it my life's work to provide spaces and care for my trans siblings. So I also want to thank everybody who's here and watching virtually for helping collaborate in that space making. I'm not here to talk about what the future is going to look like, because I have no idea. What I hope to do is use my platform to bring life back to these bones. The photos you see on the table are only a portion of the people we've lost this year. Some of these folks were just starting their lives. For the past couple of months, I have been frustrated with Christianity as a concept. I've been recalling the deep-seated trauma I faced from the church when I was trying to understand who I was. I see the messaging that the Christian nationalists use to defend their stance of hatred. But despite that, I turned to Christianity tonight to start thinking about the importance of revering and honoring these deaths. The practice of honoring the cross has taught me how to value death in the hands of an empire. I will preface that my own theology is not based on a God who condemns and sends his son to be made human and die for God's own forgiveness of God's own standards. What I want to focus on here tonight is a demonstration of public death because the message of valuing the undervalued was too radical for a system of oppression. I recognize that I'm in a seminary that challenges supersessionism, but I'm going to use a text from the Hebrew Bible that has been understood by Christians to mean Jesus and sort of modify it to process the death and violence. I'll be reading a few verses from Isaiah 53 and changing some of the pronouns from he to a plural they to talk about the folks that we have lost. This is the word of God. Isaiah 53, verse 3-5. They were despised and rejected by others, people of suffering and acquainted with infirmity. And as those from whom others hide their faces, they were despised, and we held them of no account. Surely they bore our infirmities and carried our diseases. Yet we accounted them stricken, struck down by God, and afflicted. But they were wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. Upon them was the punishment that made us whole, and by their bruises we are healed. Verse 8 and 9. By a perversion of justice they were taken away. Who could have imagined their future? For they were cut off from the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of the people. They made their grave with the wicked and their tomb with the rich, although they had done no violence and there was no deceit in their mouths. Now, this chapter is understood to mean that the servant's death, arguably Jesus or Moses or Israel, however you want to see it, is serving a larger purpose. The last verse mentions an intercession with the transgressors. I want to make clear that I am not sweeping these lives lost to an ideology that argues that everything happens for a reason. I'm not saying that we've lost folks because there's some kind of modern version of a sacrifice. I also want to make it known that I value holding space for grief. I value holding space for anger, frustration, numbness, and despair. There's a beauty in being able to honor our feelings in community. So if the messaging at any point tonight, be it mine or anybody else's, felt too action forward, know that there is space for the stillness in tragedy. This day was created to commemorate those we've lost to anti-trans violence, committed by those who choose to uphold the systems of patriarchy, cisnormativity, binarism, and white supremacy. It is, as verse 8 mentions, a perversion of justice. So what do we do with that? Death is not the opposite of life. It's the conclusion of it. And I argue here that these rebels, these folks who carried the message of truth despite the pushback of norms, died because their beings were too vibrant, too reflective of the God of love. Some didn't get to see that. Some ended their own lives because of the messaging they received from the world that we aren't worthy of respect. I want to suggest that we honor our trans kin's deaths by furthering the message of life. The unofficial motto of Transgender Day of Remembrance is remember our dead, fight like hell for the living. So may we fight like hell, raise hell, and continue to sanctify those that are still alive. And to my trans family specifically, know that I feel frustration too. Another year of counting those that we've lost. I choose to make myself visible and loud because I refuse to allow anyone to tell me that I am not made in the image of God. We are divine. And I will do what I can for us as long as I can until the day I no longer have to. I'm happy to be in community with you all because I've learned in this community that we are made too big and too holy for us to ever be made small. So I refuse to let us be small. I hope to honor these folks by continuing to fight for our lives, our hearts, and our community. And now in Spanish, to honor my Latina trans family. Nunca dejaré que nos quite nuestro valor. Somos hechos en la imagen de Dios. Somos santificados, amados y preciados en comunidad juntos. That was it for me. I want to call up one more person, my other soulmate, to come and bless us with more trans excellence, and this is how we'll wrap up the night.
Good evening. Yeah, this is just a very sad day. And an important day just to grieve with one another. I am of the belief that grief is gratitude. And that to honor those feelings is to remind yourself that there is love still in the people who have passed on. And that we should be grieving as a unit. And making space for ourselves to be able to do that. And these next couple of songs are songs that I have written in grief. And songs that I have written about grieving just mortality and being very aware of my own and my trans siblings. So this first song is called I Cannot Be Reborn. Mountains of stone, weathered by rain and hail and running water, cold like a vision conjured with nowhere left to roam, like a ghost. And I'm tired of fickle candle flames, potential freedom gone to waste, like livestock playing a human being's game. What does it mean? What does it even mean to be human anyway? 'Cause there must be more than the truth that I live and die for sport. I am awakened, I'm confident and sure I can, and I won't be reborn. Be reborn. I'm opening wounds from a body that my soul used to belong to, with the trauma of being bound to the earth, while I'm 6 feet under God's almighty curse. And the madness, my constant enemy, the sadness, the bedrock for overwhelming grief, and I'm crying for the souls I simply cannot reach. Whoa, there must be more than the truth that I live and die for sport. I am awakened, I'm confident and sure I can, and I won't be reborn. Be reborn. I won't be reborn. For the next song, I would like to call Amelia back up to accompany me. Curse. This next song is called The Curse of Knowing. I feel like just as trans people, we are pretty hyper aware of our realities and everything around us. And because we are sort of doing this amazing work of trying to live the freest lives that we possibly can within ourselves and externalizing that. It's really easy to see how much people who are not trans are just shackling themselves. And I feel like I wrote this song sort of to remember how how observing that and not being able to do anything about it sometimes feels really stifling. So this is The Curse of Knowing. Oh. And fever, I can hardly breathe in this room. And what's the reason? Did you know it would break me? Did you know I would lose my head? Oh, the world is turning red. Bloodlines burn from expectations. Bridges built on weak foundation. I guess we'll never learn. And how do I confirm if I am the problem, or if God is cruel and heavy-handed to the weak-hearted? And oh, my punishment is the curse of knowing that it's all performance. And we dance without knowing. And we dance without knowing. And we dance without knowing. And broken, resigned to love whomever gives me a little time. Don't look me in the eye, I intend to soften the weight of never being held for long, pretending to be strong while the world is turning red. Bloodlines burned from expectations. Bridges built on weak foundation. I guess we'll never learn. And how do I confirm if I am the problem, or if God is cruel and heavy-handed to the weak-hearted? And oh, my punishment is the curse of knowing that it's all performance. And we dance without knowing. And we dance without knowing. And we dance without knowing. And as we trip and fall, tell yourself it's all just bad timing. And what did I do wrong? Spellbound by awkward silence. I held on a bit too long. I found love and didn't even know it. While the world is turning red, and bloodlines burn from expectations. Bridges built on a weak foundation. I guess we'll never learn that it's all performance. have one more song. And since some of my greatest trans siblings and friends are here, and Amelia and Daniel, and I feel like as trans folks in this time of need and in this paradigm, which is crazy, leaning on each other is really important. And leaning on each other properly is really important. And the song is called A Delicate Reminder. And it's about holding space for each of us to just grow and be our unique selves with the space that we need and the space that we can take up. Thank you for listening. And 1 foot at a time, you're doing just fine. Found you by the coast, you nearly lost your mind. And I think it's astounding how you've lost your grounding again. And it happens often, and I don't want to show up just to let you down. And I'll fail you somehow, but my days feel warmer when you are around. Nothing's forever, but let it be for now. And I know love is your Achilles heel. Hearts aren't made of steel, guilty as they come, as jaded as I feared. And I know it's patronizing to claim you're not trying to grow. So just tell me when you know, 'cause I don't want to show up just to let you down. And I'll fail you somehow, but my days feel warmer when you are around. Nothing's forever, but let it be for now. Let it be for now. And I know I'm not confident that I can see you without coming undone. And you rattle my bones in ways I have never known. So where did this misery come from? Oh, how can I still love you so much? So I'm not gonna show up just to let you down. And it might take a little while, but no, it's just for now. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming and for those who have been streaming. A little plug, I do things outside of here, aside from the many caucuses and the many things that I do around here. I am putting together an art showcase for trans people, trans, BIPOC, and immigrants, or first generation. There is a flyer there with more information, and at the bottom of the program there's more information. And I'm mentioning this because aside from remembering those we've lost, it's so important to support those that are continuing to tell our stories. I'm one of the artists that is showing their work, and to commemorate where we are when we're alive and not just when we die. So there's more information. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Again, thank you. Thank you all for coming.